In the late 1970s, Britain felt cold. Factories were closing their gates for the last time. Rubbish piled up in the streets during strikes. For many young people, the future seemed like a locked door with no key. Out of this frustration, a loud, angry sound had erupted. It was called punk rock. It was a fire. But then, almost as quickly as it started, things began to change. Graffiti started appearing on city walls, simple and stark. Punk is dead. A new sound, slicker and more polished, was taking its place on the radio. And on television, it was called New Wave. The question for many was a simple one. Did this new wave put out the fire of punk, or did it just find a new way to burn? This is a story about how a raw political movement might have been tamed, or perhaps it was not tamed at all. Perhaps it just grew up and put on a different set of clothes. People wondered if powerful forces had intentionally made punk safe for everyone to consume. Punk rock was a direct response to the world around it. It was a sound born from boredom and a feeling of powerlessness. The songs were often very fast and very short. The guitars were distorted and aggressive. The singing was less about hitting the right notes and more about shouting a message. The core idea was to strip music down to its rawest essentials. This was not the complex, elaborate rock music that filled stadiums in the mid-1970s. This was something immediate and accessible. It was music that said anyone could pick up a guitar and form a band, even if you only knew 3 chords. This was the do-it-yourself, or DIY ethos. Bands would not wait for a big record company to discover them. They would press their own records in small batches. They would book their own shows in small pubs and community halls. They would create their own magazines, called fanzines, using photocopiers and staples. This was a way of building a culture from the ground up, without permission from the elites. It was a closed loop where the fans and the bands were often the same people, creating a scene that belonged entirely to them, free from corporate control. As the 1970s ended, a new sound began to emerge from the embers of the initial punk explosion. People started calling it New Wave. Sonically, it was a departure from the raw 3-chord thrash of early punk. The production grew cleaner and more polished. The jagged guitar riffs were sometimes replaced with synthesizers, catchy bass lines, more melodic vocals. Artists began to experiment, mixing punk energy with other genres: reggae, ska, disco, pop. The result was a more varied, more accessible sound, less of a sonic assault, more an invitation to dance. The business model shifted. Many new wave bands signed with major record companies. Corporations could promote on a massive scale. They funded slick music videos and secured radio airplay. New wave was suddenly everywhere. Music moved from small clubs into living rooms. There is a persistent myth that new wave was a deliberate plot to neutralize punk. The story goes that record executives, media gatekeepers, met in secret to figure out how to make this dangerous youth movement safe and profitable. They supposedly engineered a plan to promote a softer, more stylish, while suppressing its political anger. This makes for a compelling conspiracy theory. It paints a clear picture of powerful people manipulating culture from behind the scenes. The shift was seen as not a natural change, but a calculated act of co-option designed to defang a rebellion. However, the facts present a more complex, less conspiratorial picture. There is no concrete evidence, no leaked memo, no whistleblower testimony. What we do have is evidence of how markets and large media organizations behave. Record labels are businesses. Their primary goal is profit. They saw the energy of punk was popular, but its raw sound and aggressive politics were hard to sell to a mass market. The idea that a musical movement can lose its political heat is not unique to punk. A similar shift was seen in funk and soul music during the late 1970s. Earlier in the decade, artists like James Brown, Marvin Gaye, Curtis Mayfield were releasing powerful songs that directly addressed social injustice, poverty, civil rights. Their music was the soundtrack to a political struggle. But as the decade wore on, the dominant sound in the mainstream became disco. While born from the same roots, disco often prioritized escapism, dance floor joy, glamorous nightlife over direct political commentary. The protest songs did not disappear. The party anthems received far more radio play and commercial success. This parallel shows that market forces often favor what is celebratory over what is confrontational. The meaning of words can also shift over time, and this can be part of how a movement is perceived. Take the word punk itself. Before the music scene, it was an old slang term often used to describe a young, worthless person, a petty criminal. The music movement reclaimed it as a badge of honor, a symbol of defiance and outsider status. In a similar way, we can see how the meaning of words changes today. So was New Wave a deliberate campaign to neuter punk? The evidence for a conscious plot is thin. What is clear, however, is that powerful commercial and media systems can steer culture without needing a secret plan. This process can have the same outcome as a conspiracy. A raw political art form gets its edges sanded down as it is packaged for mass consumption. The anger of punk was often translated into the style of New Wave, turning a political statement into a fashion choice. This does not mean the story is a simple one of defeat. New Wave gave some punk-inspired artists a platform to reach a huge audience, sometimes smuggling in subversive ideas within catchy pop songs. The movement also forced punk to evolve. The artists who refused to compromise went deeper underground, creating scenes like hardcore and anarcho-punk that were even more fiercely independent and political. Punk did not die. It fractured and its energy flowed into new channels. As consumers of culture, what can we do? The first step is to remain alert and critical. When we're told a story about a musical or cultural movement, we should ask where that story comes from. Support real artists who are speaking their minds, especially those who are not backed by major corporations. Pay for their music, go to their shows, and buy their merchandise. Create your own art, write your own zine, or start your own podcast. Punk's most powerful idea was do it yourself. It was a spark. It is up to each of us to keep that spark from going out, to be creators and not just consumers, and to think for ourselves and, stay curious while you do it.